I was asked to do a video about the Daodejing, specifically about the first verse of the Daodejing. So today we're going to talk about it. And the first verse, that is something. It's probably the most complicated verse from the whole of the Daodejing. So if you're interested in the Daodejing, you should definitely watch this video all the way to the end, because I will first start explaining a little bit about the history of the Daodejing, both the official history and the Daoist history of the Daodejing, which is not the same. And I will talk about my experiences with the Daodejing. I will also talk about my experiences with the Daodejing, both in China and in Europe. And some of these are not the most pleasant ones for me. I will talk with you also about, of course, this verse and its place in the Daodejing as a whole, and what the Daodejing actually is for, what it is actually describing, because it is not as easy as you think. In the Daodejing translations, there's a lot to be critiqued upon, and I hope you can understand that sometimes I might sound a little bit offensive about that. I hope you don't mind me my messy office. Office is for several purposes. One of them is doing research, but also for treating my clients. And at the moment when I'm busy doing these kind of things, I have a habit of leaving a trail of things that I'm studying at, because of the simple reason that you can't just drop things down and clear everything up once you're in the process. Clients are in that sense an interruption of my studies. My studies are an interruption of my clients. I want to talk to you about the Daodejing first. I have a lot of different kind of translated copies from the Daodejing. I have a bunch of Chinese ones. And I was looking for one of my translations that I got in Qingshashan as part of a Daoist ritual about the future of Daoism and the prediction of the Daoist religion becoming the new great world religion. It was an amazing event with hundreds and hundreds of Daoist priests and monks available and present, and the oracle also that was being performed was also really amazing. But besides that, there are a lot of different kind of translations, and I have about 80 of them, yes, and I have also a lot of different kind of Chinese variations of it, interpretations and explanations. And the original Chinese, the old Chinese in which it is written, is being reinterpreted by modern Chinese all the time. And if you think from Taiwan is an older Chinese, so that's probably better, or from Singapore or something, not really like that, because the old Chinese that the Daodejing is from was a completely different kind of language than the Chinese that people are speaking right now. And as a result of that, not comparable. And that is also part of the problem of the Daodejing. First of all, the Daodejing has a separate set of histories. One history is the one that archaeologists are trying to figure out, and philologists also, they try to figure out. And what they try to understand is, where does the Daodejing come from? What archaeologists have found that in the time of the Warring Stage period, and also already before, there was a particular class of private teachers, you can say, and they had lists of bamboo slips that were maybe used for oracle use, maybe to compile combinations of texts for individual, rich, powerful, whatever kind of people, the Elon Musks of their time, or the Peter Thiels of their time, because they can use some wisdom, these people. The first Daodejing, as it came into history, was already immediately split off in two kinds. There was a Daoist version and there was a Confucian version. And the one that became famous in the West was mostly the Confucian version. And that means also that the Confucian interpretation became dominant. And one of the main interpreters from that tradition was the Wang Bi interpretation, and he made a large commentary of it when he was about 23, 24 years old, and he died just a few years later, which Daoists and Confucians, Neo-Confucians especially, they thought like this is the top of being a Daoist, namely go somewhere without leaving a trace. That means that you can die when you are finished. I think that's more a Neo-Confucian thing than a Daoist thing, because Daoists try to become an immortal. The other version of the Daodejing is commented on by Zheng Xuanjing. the The irony now is that because of the differences in the different kind of histories and translations, is that you have the actual historical development of the Tao Te Ching, which is then from bamboo slips into the Tao Te Ching, which was eventually becoming more and more dominant, and that is now in the West the main interpretation of the Tao Te Ching. When it came into the West, it was interpreted in particular kind of ways, and it started during already the Charles the Great time, and gradually there were more and more translations, interpretations, and even in capitalist theory the idea of laissez-faire was seen as a wu-wei in the Tao Te Ching, namely the non-action or the non-interference kind of aspect. And that means that the Tao Te Ching already has influenced the West in an enormous large size. It is a wrong interpretation, but that is another story. We can take another time for that if you want. The reality is that the Tao Te Ching is there and is basically a competitive language, a competitive text in regard to the Bible. What is a serious problem with the Tao Te Ching is that Western translators always took the attitude that they should make a translation understandable to the Western reader. And as a result of that, their translations were usually an interpretation, and this interpretation very often was basically, what is a nice way to say it? A moving away from the original meaning to make things fit. Just like when people talk about qi being energy, this is just to fit Western storytelling, not necessarily the ideas of Chinese culture. The idea of Jing being essence in the same in practice, when this essence, sure, that can mean a lot of things because it's the same kind of concept like smurf, just like energy is a smurf word and also spirit is a smurf word. These are words that don't really mean much, but they feel like really appropriate. The thing is that when translators talk about words, they say like, oh, this is what it means in that language, and this is the word in that language taking more or less the same semantic place in that culture, so then we take that word. But you forget then about the fact that that word is not the same. Like God is not Shangdi. Shangdi is a particular kind of God in Chinese culture, and God in the West is not the same. Although we talk about the God on high, Shangdi also means the God on high. It does not necessarily mean the same because the function is not exactly the same, even though concepts are similar. I think I say enough about that aspect. And I think you will be able to appropriate that properly. Then there is the other thing. The Chinese language is originally written from right to left, from top to bottom. And over time, there were edits and redactions, and especially because the Chinese originally didn't have a point and a comma system, the sentences were flowing into each other and there was no real interpunction in the language. This is one of the main problems of the Daodejing text. Another text too, but the Daodejing especially. And I remember when I was visiting in Qingshan, I was living there at that moment. Together with my sister, we were studying particular kind of things after we went to World Conference on Taoism. At that time, we stayed there for a while, and we were meeting with the Abbess Chang from the nunnery of Qingshan monastery. And beside that, this person was an amazing person. My sister, Chen Lifang, she made a remark to her in our conversations that I was busy translating the Tao Te Ching. And I was doing that for my students. I was not taking a serious attempt to translate the Tao Te Ching other than trying to inform my students about what Taoists seem to think about it as being different from what happens in translations. When I see her listen to that remark, she started laughing and she looked at me and she like, oh, you're such a Westerner. in Taoism, anybody knows that the Daodejing is so incredibly complicated because of its vertical, horizontal, diagonal, and whatever kind of interpretations, and the lack of interpunction, that no Taoist really understands the Daodejing. Nobody grasps the whole meaning of it. What in the West was made, we cannot comprehend the Tao. Yes. The translation, very often it's being then said, the Tao that can be talked about is not a real Tao. And that is the mystified idea comprised in this text. And we have to be aware of this. What happened though is that for me, I was at that moment also in Qingyang, Guan, Chengdu. I was studying, and I was studying with his master, teaching me a particular kind of techniques about the 6 qi and the 6 directions. And I was trying to develop that kind of technique, and it was really giving me a headache. And then what she said made me very insecure, so I never really finished these classes with my students. Sorry for my students. I still have the same ideas because I have had a long tradition of a long history of learning about the Daodejing from my teachers, because the Daodejing is very important, but it is something that you have to chew on the whole of your life. Then there is the fact that there is a particular kind of order in the received tradition, which for Taoists is like absolute truth, right? And the Taoists, they basically say, okay, if horizontal, vertical, forward, backward, and so forth doesn't really matter. You get all kind of meaning from it, and it becomes more like an oracular thing sometimes than it actually becomes like a real text, because it is something that has to make you think. Tao is incomprehensible as a whole. The whole Daodejing is a reflection of Tao, and as a result of that, you want to be able to see through it as a truth. And that means that for them, like the Quran in Islam and the Bible in Christianity, it has divine proportions as a text, and therefore it is infallible, right? This is a very important thing to understand, because if you say like, oh, but it actually was this history, then for a Taoist you have invalidate that truth. Like if you say Zhang Xiaofan doesn't exist, you invalidate the truth of the followers of Zhang Xiaofan, because for them Zhang Xiaofan was a real person, and whether it's provable or not provable, it's the same like if you say Bodhidharma was the founder of Shaolin, which he was not. It's very clearly proven, but for Shaolin people, Bodhidharma was the founder of that, because he was the first patriarch of their branch of Buddhism. So there's a discrepancy between the reality of people who are really studying this and people who are reading it and thinking it's philosophy, because it is definitely not philosophy. It is about a description of the nature of reality. So it is something between philosophy and physics, you can say. It describes the world as it is. And if you start from the back, what we call the back, the last part, and you start reading forward, you can gradually build up in the meanings of things, and then you can start seeing like, oh, okay, actually it starts with society as a whole. This is the basic teachings of the worldview of Taoism, and like how the world should be built. Like we should live in small communities where we can, we can hear our neighbors, but we cannot really get into an argument with them. And we also have to come to grips with all kind of other things. One of the things is the division of the reality in 3 layers of heaven and the below heaven, of earth and the above earth, and then of course the human realm in between, which Confucian calls the human realm, but which for Taoists basically is the water realm. And these are 3 spheres that are intertwined with each other, and they have their own nature of creatures living there. The gods above, the demons and the ghosts below, and we and the animals and the plants, ghosts, demons, and so forth, that get stuck there in between. Then the Daodejing teaches then at that moment that when you study properly the practices on which the Daoist teaching is based upon, you learn to travel between these different realms. And because of learning to travel between these different realms, you can move to the top, you can move to the bottom, and you can negotiate for people between these realms. And this is basically what it means to be like a shamanic kind of type. And the sage, it is being called in the Daodejing. Oh, I have a magpie just in my garden breaking into my rabbit house. trying to steal food there for his babies in the tree in my garden. That's always so cute to watch. Anyway, this gives me the opportunity to talk to you about the fact that this is actually the end of part one. And we're going to continue with this story in part two, where we're going to analyze the first verse of the Daodejing, where we talk about the Dao Katao Fei Chang Dao. In the meantime, please enjoy this beautiful bird, one of the most intelligent birds in your environment. These special birds are not only very intelligent, but they're also very careful parents. I remember one time finding a baby chick and the parents trying to fight me to defend it. The mom was away feeding or finding food when I found the chick. I took it in, and the next day the mother flies up to me and says to me, "Are you going to take good care of my kid? Otherwise, I'm going to fight you until you," whatever she had in mind. But she was very brave, just 1 meter in front of me, yelling at me and telling me to take care of her kid properly. At some point, we have to discuss the meaning of the concept of Daodejing, and I think this moment is as good as any other moment.